says he's just a country boy, but when he has something to say, even world leaders are keen to listen. And it seems he always has something worthwhile to say, worth listening to. Would you please welcome our very special guest today, Mr. John Denver. Welcome, John. Always good to see you.
Always great to be back in Australia and to visit you, Ray.
All right, let's talk about Windstar again. Interesting that that it is the issue of the late 80s and hopefully the 90s, the environment now. But right back to Rocky Mountain High, and things you were writing before you became popular were about the environment, were about these issues, weren't they?
Yes, sir. Well, nature has always been the source of the greatest contentment in my life. When I was a child, I felt like I didn't have a lot of friends. My father was in the Air Force. We moved around a great deal. It's difficult for children sometimes to make friends. And the things that I thought about, the things that were on my mind, are not necessarily what my contemporaries were feeling or talking about. And I used to go out into the desert, or I'd climb up into a tree, or I'd be up in the mountains, and just anywhere that I could get out in nature. And there was a great solace for me there, and a great sense of peace and of rejuvenation-like, although I wasn't tired then. Now, when I have a day out in the mountains, it's rejuvenating for me. So in any case, that was always a big part of my life. And then when I started writing songs, certainly many metaphors came to me. The way that I talk about things, I use metaphors from nature. And around all of that, as I got the chance to travel around the world, I found that there were things to be concerned about, there were things to be aware of, and issues that needed addressing. And it seems that intuitive feeling from my childhood and as I was growing up has turned out to be pretty right on.
Okay, Windstar, how did that begin?
Well, Windstar began actually as a dream when I was about 12 years old. And it had to do with these feelings of nature, and that sometime I was going to have a place in the mountains, and I knew that I was going to have friends all over the world somehow. And I envisioned a place that people would come to from all over the world, that they would meet other people like themselves, that they would come away from this place strengthened, rejuvenated, going back to whatever their work was, wherever they lived in the world, and knowing that they weren't alone in their feelings, in the things that they were concerned about. And in 1976, I realized that I was finally in a position to be able to do something about this, or I ought to stop talking about it. And so with a friend of mine, Tom Crum, we founded the Windstar Foundation. And we've done some wonderful things. It's always been around the environment, although it's had to do with energy resources, I should say, and hunger in the world, the resolution of conflict. So many of the things, for me, Windstar was like a tool, a way to focus my energy on the things that I'm concerned about or have been involved in over all of these years.
So the concert tomorrow night is Higher Ground. You're going to touch on some of those issues as you've done in Japan, as you've done all around the States as well.
We were in Japan last Saturday night with this program, in Toronto, Canada, a few weeks ago, and we've done it 5 times in the United States in 5 different cities. There are 16 Windstar Connection groups in the United States, 1 in Canada, 1 in Tokyo, and 1 here in Sydney, Australia, which is how we happen to be doing this program. It's not a concert, although there are some pieces of music that I do to sort of underline the other information that we're presenting in the program. There are quite a few videos that we use. We're putting forth a lot of information, which I think, certainly the people here in Australia are already aware of, but perhaps doing it with a bit of a different perspective about how each of us is a little bit responsible for what we see out there in the world, and that each of us has it within us to make a difference out there and to begin doing the things that will, in fact, save us and save our planet.
We've been doing much of that, as I mentioned to you earlier, much of that this year on the program, and my sense is that your timing couldn't be more spot on, that now's the time where people keep saying to us, whenever we do something on the environment in Australia, they keep saying, well, that's fun, what can I do? What can I do to do it? And that's basically what you're about, isn't it?
Well, that's it. Everywhere I go in the world, and a part of the Higher Ground program is like a conversation, like this one we're having here. When you get together with people that you care about, you're having dinner, and it's not just idle social chatter, you talk about the things that you're interested in, the things that you're concerned about. And I've had this conversation really with people all over the world, in the Soviet Union, in China, in India, and they all want to know, what is it that I can do? And people feel like they're powerless in face with the enormity of the problems that confront us. And there are many things that you can do. In the United States, 26% of the toxic waste that we produce every year, and we produce in the United States 1 ton a year for every man, woman, and child. Can you imagine?
Toxic
And
waste.
26% of that comes from our homes. And I'm sure that it's similar over here, although I
Bet you are.
doubt that it's the enormity of the amount that we're producing in the United States, but it's the same kind of thing.
All right, let's take a break. One way to get back into it, what are we making weapons for, do you know?
Well, I simply don't know anymore. It's always been an expression of our feeling of separateness. It's always been a you or me world, which means me first, of course. And I think we're in a time when we have to begin living a you and me world. We have to begin thinking of ourselves as a global community and as a human family and living like that.
Are you more optimistic with Mikhail Gorbachev now and the movement towards some sort of rapprochement?
I certainly am. I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Gorbachev when he was in Washington a year and a half ago, and listened to his talks and read what he's been saying, and I think that he's perhaps the most courageous man in the world today, and the only true leader that's really out there. I think he's a remarkable man.
What would you say? I asked you this question once before when Ronald Reagan was president, but let's ask it again. If you could take George Bush to Russia, to the Soviet Union, where you've been, or to China, what would you show him?
First of all, I'd want to take him to meet the people. I've had the opportunity to visit with people in the Soviet Union, and they're just like ourselves. They have a wonderful sense of humor. I think Aussies and Soviets would get along wonderfully together. And they have a great feeling for their children. They love the outdoors. Everybody's wish in the Soviet Union is to have a country house. And they love lyrical songs. Annie's song is very, very popular over there. I learned how to sing it in Russian. And they loved it, and they're wonderful, wonderful people.
You also did, in fact, the first fundraiser for the victims of Chernobyl.
Yes, we did a concert, a benefit in Kiev for the victims of Chernobyl, and it was quite a moving experience.
We're separated by ideologies. I mean, we're the same. We've got the same bodies, we've got the same everything, but we're separated by what we think and the way we treat people. I think we should all be just one people. And
One World, One People. That was the name of this program we did in Japan the other night.
Tell us about that. In fact, you just mentioned that commercial break. You told me about your experience.
Well, I met a wonderful man in Japan who happens to be the head of Zen Buddhism. He's like, in Catholicism, it would be the Pope, this beautiful 91-year-old man. And he was saying that he thought it was too late to do anything about the environment. But we spoke to him about the things that WinStar is trying to do, and that we can make a difference, and we can change our minds and change the ways that we live. And it turned him around, and he's taking out a full-page ad now in the Tokyo Times, I think, to make a little a statement for WinStar. And what he wants to say is that you can make a difference. That was the thing that got him. Make a conscious choice and make a difference. And then this one world, one people, the notion seems to start getting to people more and more. Everywhere you go, they like that thought. And what are the ways that we can begin to break down the walls that we have built up between ourselves and one another?
John, what do you say, though, when you say what you just said a moment ago, and someone else, a cynic or a skeptic, says to you, well, that's fine, but that's airy-fairy, John. I mean, that's if we lived in an ideal world, that'd be terrific. But in the real world, people are going to keep putting their garbage in the oceans and the rivers.
Well, I think that we create the world that we live in. And in that real world, we can make it the way we want it to make. And it begins with the kind of actions that you take, and whether or not you throw the garbage in the ocean, or whether you can take the time to pick up that piece of litter, or whether you can have the sensibility around you that somebody else's idea, even the guys with the water companies or even the lumbermen, they have their jobs, they have considerations, and we're all trying to work together to get to the same kind of place. And we have to do it together.
All right, let's take a break.
Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure.